Well, there was very little in it, so we should be in for an excellent race.
You know, my qualifying pace is better than I thought it was going to be, because I qualified 6th for this race. So Bila once again takes the pole ahead of Menu and Plato. I qualified 6th in the end of that, Kelvin Burt was 9th, and Tim Harvey completes the top 10, so without further ado, let's get on with race 2. So, we need to finish in 6th position or better in order to clear this race, and it is fair to say that whilst I may not be able to get off the line very well, at the very least I am able to prove I can at least get through the corners stronger than most, as I now overtake Jason Plato for 4th position. I reckon the race itself is probably going to be over by the end of lap 2, as I just managed to save it after getting loose there for a moment, and almost got a bump there from Plato in the Renault, as I'm now closing in on Menu, who appears to be just ahead of me, and up to 3rd position I go, as I'm now trying to figure out how to clear the Honda. I do manage to clear him successfully, and now I am up into 2nd position, and closing rapidly on the Audi as we head into the chicane. I pull off a dive bomb to clear him, and now this is pretty much going to be race over the way I see it. Because at this stage, I've actually done pretty well, all things considered. And now, because of this, I am immediately propelling myself up into the lead. And it looks as though this race is already over. But yeah, so anyways, going back to the subject of the Download Festival. It's apparently believed, of course, to be the final tour for Kiss because, well, obviously both Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons are old men because they're both pretty much in their early to mid-70s by now, and it is fair to say that whilst the other two guys, I would say, have probably got a few more years left in them. Obviously I wouldn't suspect Paul and Gene are going to be engaged in touring for much longer. Someone probably will tell me in the comments about knowing if this either was or wasn't the final tour for Kiss. Something tells me it was, even though it was also believed to be that it would also be the final tour for Iron Maiden. But as I learned a couple of months ago, I heard they're actually going on tour again, Iron Maiden. I'm going to assume it must be because of contractual obligations or something. Either that or Bruce Dickinson has decided he wants to keep going for a little longer. Bruce Dickinson, by the way, is Iron Maiden's lead singer. And it is fair to say that because I was able to get into the Download Festival, that was the only real place I could actually see someone as phenomenal as those two bands were. And even though I could not sleep on Sunday night, annoyingly, I was at least able to say the concert, well, the festival, why did I say concert? I don't know, anyways. I am able to say that the festival overall was mostly good, barring the loud party they had on Sunday night and basically kept going until 3 AM Monday morning, essentially, but with the exception of that, and the long walk I had to take from the car park to get into camp with whatever equipment it was I had at the time, I can confidently say I did have a good time altogether. And it is fair to say that, well, from that point on, I also knew that because of how exhausting it was, I knew I was going to need at least a few years before I could decide to go back to one of those concerts, well, festivals, whatever you call them. Maybe I will go back to a download festival in the future, but I personally don't think it's going to be something I'll do for at least the next 2 to 3 years or so. And I just spun out one of the Nissans. Oh well. Anyways. Dealing with some lapped traffic and hoping to keep my car under control whilst I'm at it. As I get punted there by Tim Harvey in the leading Peugeot. I did mention before that I restarted this because, well, I was needing a car that would be easier for me to cope with than the Audi, at least in terms of weight. And I think I have found my solution with choosing the Volvo. Of course, I could have chosen the Honda, but I decided, well, because I wanted to do things my way, I would go along with choosing the Volvo because I figured it was my next best choice. So, coming through the final hairpin once again, and now starting lap 6 here at Donington. And it does look as though this is going to be yet another dominant win in my first 2 outings for... oh shit. Yeah, that was a pretty heavy impact. Also, that's probably the first time I've actually wrecked in this race, so I think that's probably the first time I've actually crashed in this race. Well, either spun or crashed, essentially, in this race. Surprises me to say that it took this long for me to actually wreck out for whatever reason. But anyways, I am back under control once again, and the domination continues at this stage. As I'm now trying to figure out how to clear the Peugeot just up ahead of me. But still, that's probably the first time all weekend long to start the showdown I've actually wrecked. And it does surprise me to say that it took this long for an impact such as that one to actually take its toll. But either way, I chose to restart this. I didn't want to do it initially, but I decided, because the stress of Brands Hatch in the wet was really starting to get to me, I simply decided, after many weeks of thinking about this, my only real option was to restart the showdown from scratch and see if I could manage to have an easier time with a different car. And hopefully, if it's possible, the Volvo will manage to do just that. Potentially. And the Volvo is being held up by someone. Is my teammate involved in this? Oh, he is. As he is battling there with one of the Nissans. And I now see one of the Audis just up ahead of me. I think that's Jamie Bintcliffe who is just up ahead of me there in the Audi. And just gonna push him out of the way so he does not cause any issues with my teammates. I also decided, well, because my teammate is fighting for points here, I might as well just give him some assistance and see if it helps. Of course, I don't expect my teammate to win, but hopefully if it is possible, he could get a podium before all of this is over. As I'm now closing in on one of the Hondas just up ahead of me. I am in the slipstream of the Honda as we head under the Dunlop tyre bridge. Probably didn't need to punt him out of the way, but either way, he would have held me up otherwise. I also know this is the way the AI tend to race me a lot of the time, if they have the advantage, so technically, all I can really say is, under the regards. And there is an old saying in racing, but I don't use it a lot of the time unless I have to. But the saying is, if you ain't cheating, you ain't winning. And it is fair to say that not even I am immune from this concept when I need to play dirty. Probably don't need to do it in this race because, well, I'm basically just leading this by an absolute tear anyway, so probably no need for me to be this reckless, but either way, it doesn't matter because I am closing in on the leading Honda now. I think that was James Thompson who I just cleared there, whilst I'm basically diving to the grass, making sure that whatever does happen, I don't end up being in the shit. And got two runners ahead of me now, as Plato is once again ahead of Menu in this race, although I would highly doubt Jason is going to be my contender for the title. Menu will more than likely be my championship contender by the time we get past this weekend. And I'm going to assume the only reason why Plato is beating Menu here is simply because he seems to have the superior speed. But either way, it doesn't matter because as long as I know he's taking points away from Menu, then, you know, what have I got to lose? To open up the season before Menu begins to hit the overdrive button, which I have no doubt in saying he probably will hit that button. I should also mention I have created a new outro for these videos from now on, because, well, I've decided, since I've not really changed my outro now for over 2 years, I decided it was time for a change. I probably will upload my next video outro at some point, but it is fair to say I will have multiple. But as to which one I will use for whatever games I play, well, that's for me to decide and for you to find out what video outros I will use. And it will depend on knowing if one of those video outros will be the one I use for this. But anyways, yeah. So, overlapped the entire field now at this stage, as I will be 11 laps into this race next time around. And it is fair to say I am easily coming to grips now with this Volvo compared to what I had anticipated previously. It seems as though the Volvo is the right choice for me because I seem to have a bit more adaptability to one of the front-wheel drive machines compared to the four-wheel drive machines, because I'm not having to shift as much weight. And yes, four-wheel drive may be useful for certain races, but it also means you're carrying more weight, because four-wheel drive cars do tend to be heavier than front-wheel drive cars. And even though I may not necessarily get the start I want off the line, once it comes to getting through the corners, I can definitely say this car is giving me a much easier time of entering the corners compared to what the Audi was giving me. And maybe if it's possible, I can actually win the championship using the Volvo because of it. It also depends on knowing if Kelvin is able to prove himself through certain parts of the season in saying he can score a good haul of points on a regular basis. even though I probably will have to use my old video outro one more time, because if I do manage to win the championship, and I'm not saying I will or won't, but if I do, then there is a new video, well, a new audio file I've chosen to use for the purpose of... Oh, hi John. So glad to say he did not spin out there. But anyways. So, at this stage, I would say things are going fine with me and my new ride at Volvo. It looks as though everything is going the way I want it to. As I now dispose of one of the Nissans. And make a little bit of contact there with one of the Peugeots. Of course, it was not intentional, because I was on the brakes. And now, trying to clear Derek Warwick in the Vauxhall. And this now puts a majority of the field 2 laps down. And the real back markers 3 laps down. The way I see it. But anyways. So, I did manage to prove the Audi did have race-winning speed, but ultimately, because the stress of Brands Hatch was becoming too much for me to handle, I simply decided the best option I really had with my packed university schedule and basically the boatloads of work I have to do, I figured my best option was to just start from scratch again with the Showdown and see if the Volvo could maybe give me better luck. And I'm happy to say at the moment that's precisely what the Volvo seems to be giving me at the moment. Of course, I'm not going to say it's invincible, but it is fair to say I've definitely proven that I've learned to be a bit more adaptable to the Volvo than I was with the Audi. It's also because, well, personally, I quite like Volvos. I think a lot of the cars Volvo create nowadays are good ones. And this is just one of them. It should also be worth mentioning that at one point Volvo was owned by Ford. But nowadays, but at least that was until 2008 happened, because, well, when the financial crash hit, Ford had to sell basically all the car brands they owned so they could cope with the sudden shock of the financial crash which emerged that year. And ultimately, I think Volvo was bought out by another company, but I don't think it was GM. I mean, I know there was one company that bought Volvo, but I couldn't tell you whether or not Volvo became its own independent brand or if it was bought out by a different company. It was definitely one of those two things, but I couldn't tell you which one. Either way, I've now overlapped a majority of the field twice in this race. At the end of lap 15, and now it looks as though from here my run is pretty much going to be firing on all cylinders. As I come up to the end of lap 16, heading under the tyre bridge now once again. I am half a second up on my previous PB. I'm hopeful in saying this will manage to give me a new best lap time, but if it doesn't, then I won't be surprised. And so, heading up to the end of lap 16, I now have just 2 laps to go here, as I now beat my previous PB by a second, and closing in on one of the runners, so I could potentially lap the field twice in this race if I get lucky, but it is going to require concentration for me to achieve this feat. But either way, the AI will still complete the full race distance because, well, apparent as there might be... Oh. Is that menu or Plato? Oh, it's menu. Okay. So, overlapping the 2 runners now once again, as I can see one of the Fords just up ahead of me. I'll make it easier for him and just get rid of the Nissan. So in case if he is fighting for a position, I'll just hand it to him. And coming to the end of what should now be the penultimate lap here at Donington. Should be the white flag lap next time around, as they call it in America. I have mentioned numerous times before that I am a culmination of British and American English in terms of the words and phrases I like to use. And it looks as though I'm now going to put these guys a 3rd lap down. Even though I am going to try and make sure that my teammate does not die from this. But anyways. So, I think my teammate is fighting with Tim Harvey for the position there. The way I see it. So, I'm going to try and stay behind him as much as I can. Make sure I don't crash him, because he is my teammate. It's probably the last thing I want to do here. And so, heading through this section of corners now, one final time. I've now successfully cleared Kelvin Burt and put him a 3rd lap down, as I can see one of the Peugeots just up ahead. And making more contact there with one of the Nissans. But either way, doesn't matter, because I'm going to, unsurprisingly, achieve the sweep at the Donington GP circuit.
The new Volvo driver is really storming this season, and another victory moves the team further up in the Constructors' Championship. Let's have a look at the final race positions.
Oh, okay. So, it was a real dogfight for 2nd position between the 2 runners. So, Plato beats Menu in the end ahead of Thompson, Beeler, Tarquini, Bintcliffe. And Tim Harvey completes the top 8 in the Peugeot. And then, for the bottom 8, we have David Leslie finishing ahead of Kelvin Burt. And then it was Derek Warwick in 11th, just outside the points ahead of Hoy, Watt, Radicic, Reed and Cleland completing the finishing order. So let's move on to the points.
Well, with today's races over, let's see the championship table. Anything could still happen, but look who's in the lead.
Yes, Tiff, look who is in the lead. Not really too surprised to say that I sweeped both races to start off the championship. So, basically, I'm going to save over all of these files I previously saved because, well, I don't need them anymore. And so, there we go. Our first two races are done. And now let's move on to Silverstone for our second set of races.